Hello there, good afternoon. Today we'll be looking at the overview of the oil and gas industry. I am your presenter. My name is Kunle Adeleke. I'm the managing consultant of Aquila Consults Limited. At Aquila Consults, we provide services ranging from engineering design and support services to project management, engineering and technical training, and tendering support services. In terms of capabilities, we are able to do front-end engineering design, detailed engineering design, and fabrication engineering services for onshore and offshore facilities, along with industrial structures. In terms of content, so we'll be looking at introduction, oil and gas terminologies, oil and gas producing countries, oil and gas industry supply chain, which comprises upstream, midstream, and downstream segments. We'll also be looking at the types of organizations in the oil and gas industry, and be concluding with some common industry acronyms and references. So as part of the introduction, we just need to know that oil and gas are some of the world's most important resources, as they are the essential raw materials for over 2,000 end products. And they are also used for heating, electricity, and lubrication. And the industry plays a critical role in the global economy as it generates over $3 trillion annually. Crude oil and natural gas can be found naturally occurring in the Earth's crust as compressed remains of plants and animals in sedimentary rocks such as sandstone, limestone, and shale. The companies that drill and produce crude oil and gas are referred to as exploration and production, or E&P companies. So the aim of this presentation is just to help anybody, whether you're an engineer or not, or any other professional interested in understanding how the oil and gas industry works. So first, we'll be looking at the oil and gas terminologies. Some of the terminologies we'll be looking at includes things such as sweet and sour crude, light and heavy crude. These are ways of classifying crude oil, as crude oil from different parts of the world are priced differently based on these characteristics, which we'll be discussing shortly. But some of the examples of the common crude oil in the world include West Texas Intermediate, Brent crude, Arab heavy, Arab extra light, Suez blend, Bonny light, Bakken crude, etc. So let's quickly look at the difference between sweet and sour crude versus light and heavy crude. So for sweet and sour crude, this is determined by the sulfur content in the mixture. So crude with high sulfur content is actually referred to as sour crude, while that with lower sulfur content is referred to as sweet crude. Generally, sweet crude is more desirable because sulfur in the form of hydrogen sulfide in the crude can lead to the corrosion of the pipelines and the equipment. So people would prefer sweet to sour crude. Also, in terms of light and heavy crude, crude with higher density is known as heavy crude, and the ones with lower densities are known as light crude. Now, it's easier for refineries to process light crude and heavy crude because the equipment requirement is lesser. So heavy crude generally have heavier hydrocarbon chains compared to light crude with lighter or lower hydrocarbon chain. And so you need to do more refining to obtain your resources from heavy crude oil. Another thing we need to know is the way oil and gas is measured. Now, oil production is normally measured in barrels, and a barrel is approximately 42 US gallons. And 1,000 barrels is commonly denoted as MBBL, while 1,000,000 barrels is denoted as double MBBL, that's MMBBL. For gas, gas is normally measured in terms of cubic feet or standard cubic feet, known as CUF. Now, the term MMCF is a million cubic feet, similar to crude oil, while BCF refers to a billion cubic feet, and TCF refers to a trillion cubic feet. Now, another thing oil and gas company or E&P companies do is to describe their production in terms of barrel of oil equivalent, which means when you produce both oil and gas, you express everything in terms of crude oil. And to do this, 1 barrel of oil equivalent, or BOE, has the same energy as 6,040 cubic feet of gas, or 1 BBL is about 6,000 cubic feet, or MCF of gas. Another thing we need to note in terms of terminology is reserve. So what we call oil and gas reserve, so that is the confirmed quantity of oil and gas owned by an E&P company, which is still in the ground. So it means the oil has been drilled and you've estimated the quantity that can be obtained from that field. So that's known as the reserve. And you use that to value a company, an E&P company. Now, in terms of producing countries, oil and gas are actually distributed well around the world, except that the amount is not equally distributed. So we have about 90 countries in total that can produce oil, but we have a group called Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, which comprises 13 members that control about 40% of the production and about 79% of the crude oil reserve. These OPEC countries include Algeria, Angola, Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Libya, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Venezuela. While we also have some non-OPEC countries which also produce a lot of oil. So they are among the major producers. These include United States, Mexico, Brazil, Denmark, Norway, the United Kingdom, Russia, and China. So these are some of the biggest oil producers in the world. In terms of gas, the biggest producers include USA, Russia, Iran, Canada, Qatar, and China. So the next slide shows the graph of how oil is distributed. The black color and very deep refers to the countries with higher production, and the lighter colors refer to countries with less production. So from the map, we can see that both on one hand, you have Venezuela and Saudi. So they produce they have about 200 billion to 300 billion in reserve. And then they are followed closely by Russia and I think Algeria here. Then followed by USA, Brazil, Nigeria, China, and others. So you could see the distribution by proven reserve in this chart. This next chart just shows the OPEC countries' reserve. So first, the blue chart shows that OPEC versus non-OPEC. So you could see the reserve, about 79% of the crude oil. But also the table below shows the distribution among the OPEC members. So among OPEC members, you will see that Venezuela actually has the highest reserve, although in terms of production, it doesn't produce as much as Saudi Arabia. So what I've said earlier, top oil and gas producers are summarized in this chart as of 2017 or 2017. So you will see the top 5 oil producers and gas producers in that chart. Now let's go straight to the oil and gas industry supply chain, which is the main topic actually. So the oil and gas industry supply chain can be divided into 3, namely upstream, midstream, and downstream. Now, upstream basically refers to the exploration and production segment, and it encompasses all activities related to searching for, developing, and extraction of the oil, crude oil, and natural gas from either onshore or offshore fields. Midstream entails the processing, storage, transportation of oil and gas, and the main means of transporting oil and gas is actually pipeline, but sometimes you also use trucking or oil tankers and railways to distribute these resources. Downstream will be everything else, which range from refining of the crude oil, purifying of the natural gas, through to sales, marketing, product distribution, retail, and everything in between. And also your purchase of the sales outlet where you can buy these resources: petroleum, gasoline, kerosene, jet fuel, others. So those are all part of the downstream. So this chart in this slide shows that this delineation of the three segments there. So you could see from the chart, the upper part of the upstream shows an offshore production platform, and the lower part is an onshore facility. From there, you go on to processing, then to storage. And then from storage, you send it to the refinery, and also petrochemicals. And from there, from petrochemical, you get a lot of your products, including plastics and others. And from refining, you take it to your outlet for sales to final consumers. So let's go a bit more into details about upstream, which we said includes the searching for and the location and the extraction of the oil and gas. So under upstream, we have exploration and production. So what the exploration part encompasses the processes and methods used to locate and discover the potential site for oil and gas drilling and extraction. And this is the first stage in oil and gas production. So how do you do this? You need geological surveys and seismic imaging to search for or to locate potential oil and gas fields. After you have succeeded in doing that, you move on to drilling, which is when you actually drill the well to confirm that what you found is actually oil and gas, and if it is of commercial quantity. Drilling can be achieved both onshore and offshore. With onshore, you have either fixed or mobile drilling rigs, while offshore, you can use three types of rigs, including jackup, semi-submersible, and drill ship. So this slide shows the example of a seismic image, which you would check to locate oil and gas. So if you look at this area, it looks like a reservoir of oil, of the crude oil. Now, this next slide shows pictures of some drilling rigs, both for onshore and offshore. The other aspect of upstream segments, as I mentioned earlier, is the production. So for the production, after you've discovered and drilled, then you actually, so that describes the process of bringing the oil out of the ground. And the activities here would include efficient recovery of the oil and gas from the producing field, gathering and short-term storage of the oil and gas, and when the field, the life of the field is exhausted or all the oil and gas has been taken, you have to plug and abandon the field. So these are part of the production activities. The ways you produce onshore and offshore are a bit different. In offshore, if you have several wells, you can group them together in clusters and gather the different produced fluids and pipe them to the processing facility. But for offshore, you normally have at least the basic processing facility located right there on the platform, because sometimes there may be no pipeline facility around to take the oil to a processing facility. So most times you do some basic processing on the offshore platform itself and dispose the unwanted constituents in an environmentally friendly manner. So this slide just shows a picture of oil and gas production onshore, while this other slide shows the different types of oil platforms you could use for producing offshore. So what you will notice here is that the water depth increases, so with the different types of platforms. So the platform you will use for shallow offshore, for instance, is different from what you will use in deep offshore. So this itself is another topic in itself for training. It's actually one of the things we offer as part of our offshore platform design. Now we can go to the midstream segment. So under the midstream segment, we have the processes that includes processing of the oil and gas, storing, transporting, and marketing of the crude oil itself, natural gas, or the other products from the mix or mixture of obtained from the well. So in terms of processing, so you need to install some equipment to process the fluid in this case, because what you actually have now is still a fluid, it's not yet oil or gas. So it's that fluid that you process, and one of the steps, so the processing activities includes: one, measuring of the production rate of the fluid as obtained from the reservoir; two, separation of the oil, gas, water, and other constituents from one another; three, removal of impurities so that you can prepare the crude oil or gas for sale in the next process; and four, the storage of the crude oil or natural gas before you move it on to the next segment. So as I've mentioned earlier, in offshore facility, you may have partial or even full processing facility to carry out those things mentioned earlier. But sometimes you just do basic processing and take it off to an onshore terminal where it will be finally processed and prepared for export or sales to refineries. In terms of transportation and storage, so once the crude oil has been separated, you can either store it there or send to a terminal, which most times will be located near a seaport or river port for easy export. Or you send it by pipeline or train or other means to the refinery. However, if you have to store on site, these are the ways you could achieve that, either by tank farms, bulk terminals, or by refinery holding tanks. So you could actually ship it straight to the refinery holding tank. So this chart here just summarizes the processes involved in the processing of the product from the well. So you can see from the well. So we're assuming here that your well is predominantly crude oil. So you take the oil to the manifold, from where you go through processing. Then you have heating. You remove your gas to compress and dehydrate, and then you send your crude oil to the crude oil storage tank, which we may further ship outside. But before you send it out, you have to you take it to the metering skid, which measures the quantity of the oil you are sending out, and then you export to your final terminal facility from where it is sent or exported out. So this is an example of a crude oil terminal where you have both processing and storage. So you can see a lot of tanks. So those are for storage, and from here you can ship the crude to any part of the world. Now, another aspect is for gas. So we talked a bit more about crude oil in the previous presentation. So let's look at gas now. Now, when you produce fluid from the well, sometimes it's more of crude oil and sometimes it's more of gas. So if the well is more of gas, it's still unlikely that it will just be pure gas. So it's likely to be in association with some other liquids. So the crude oil or the natural gas that is in association with crude oil is known as associated gas, while the one that is from predominantly gas well is known as non-associated gas, or NAG. So when you produce gas, you have to first treat it at a treatment facility, which will be normally close to the production wells. And in offshore, you actually locate it on a separate platform. If it's from an associated well, you may have a gas compression platform right there offshore to treat the gas. So This treatment's aim is to remove impurities such as hydrogen sulfide, which we mentioned earlier, carbon dioxide, inert gases, produce water, water vapor, and solid. Now, part of what to remove from this natural gas, now this is we're assuming is a non-associated gas well that we are producing now, producing from. So you can obtain liquid hydrocarbons known as condensates as the gas is passed through series of separators too. And these condensates are normally higher particle hydrocarbons within the range of hexane, that's C6 to nonane, C9. So, and you can either send this condensate to the refinery to be blended with crude oil or sent directly to petrochemical plants, or rather used to, or refined in a condensate refinery. Now, the treated gas now obtained after removal of the condensate can be sold to the wholesale gas market if its quality is sufficient, or you take it to a further gas processing facility. Especially if you still have some other hydrocarbons, that's methane, ethane, propane, and probably butane. Now, what we actually know as natural gas is methane, that's C1. So that is the pure natural gas, but most times it's in mixture with the other gases. So these other gases, that's from ethane to propane, are known as natural gas liquids. And if the gas, after extraction of condensate, contains both methane and ethane to propane, is known at this stage as wet or rich gas. So this chart just shows the removal of gas or the process of treatment of gas. So you can see you separate the gas to obtain the product. So you first remove the condensate, which you can sell directly or sell to the refinery or refine it by itself, or then you pass the wet gas through these processes: acid gas treatment for sulfur recovery, dehydration for water disposal. Then you send it for further processing if required. That's if it has the other gases, and to obtain your natural gas liquids, NGLs, or then the dry gas, which is methane, is sent to the end user. So we've discussed the treatment and processing, then now distribution. So now, sometimes if you do not have a market or end users nearby, you may have to convert your methane or natural gas to liquid to be able to ship it to distant location. So once you obtain natural gas liquids from the wet gas, you can take these ones to the refineries or to petrochemical plants, where they serve as raw materials. Whereas the dry gas itself, which is methane, can be used directly by factories, power plants, and petrochemical plants. Now, so for the gas you want to convert to liquid, if you want to ship abroad or to a distant location, you have to do this by compression at minus 162 degrees Celsius to produce what we call liquefied natural gas, or LNG. This process of liquefaction actually reduces the volume of the natural gas by up to a factor of 600 as it converts from gaseous to liquid state. So with this, what you are able to compact the volume so that you can ship in special containers. So the liquefaction process involves several cooling stages in what we call an LNG plant, and then after the liquefaction, you store them in special insulated LNG carriers, which are like tankers that you use to transport them. And then when you take it to the receiving point at the other end, it could be the end of the world. You could take liquefied gas from Africa, for instance, to Asia. But at the end point, you need what you call regasification terminals to convert the liquid back to gas. And then you can now send your gas by pipeline to the end users in that country. So now, if you are producing associated gas, for instance, and the quantity is not much and you do not have any end user close by, you may have to find other ways of storing the natural gas. So the common ways used are in salt caverns, depleted gas reservoirs, and aquifers. So that's where you could store gas. So this slide summarizes further processing of natural gas, either as dry gas to your end users, or you liquefy to LNG and then ship it to the other end. Then the natural gas liquid, so this summarizes what you could do with them. Yeah, you take it through a process called fractionation to obtain the components which are ethane, propane, and butane. And these components can be used by petrochemical facilities. And then you can also work on it to obtain LPG fuel, or use them in the refinery and other plants. So this summarizes the further processes you could have on natural gas. So this is an example of a gas plant. So you could see the pipe network likely coming from the production wells to the gas processing facility. And this is an example of an LNG facility. This is located at Bonny in Rivers State, Nigeria. So now we are in the downstream segment. So in the downstream, one of the prominent activities here is the refining of the crude oil. So a petroleum refinery is a large-scale industrial complex that produces saleable petroleum products from crude oil. So refinery operations is quite complicated, but whatever it is, what you want to achieve can be summarized into 3 different categories. So what you get from those refineries. So one of the main processes is distillation, which is just the separation of those materials, just based on their volatility. So you just heat the crude oil and you obtain different materials at different boiling points. And this is the first and most basic step in the refining process. So there are some end product you can obtain straight away at this point, but there are some other products that you have to take through the second stage, which is called cracking. So cracking involves breaking up of the heavy molecules into lighter ones. Then you have the third process called reforming, which involves changing the chemical nature of hydrocarbon to achieve desired physical properties and to increase their market value. So this chart shows a petroleum refining process. You could see from the crude oil tank, you heat it in a furnace and you do distillation to obtain first some intermediate products, which may include propane, butane, others, naphtha, kerosene, diesel, heavy gas oil. Then you need further reformation through these other processes here in blue to obtain your final products as listed. So a product like gasoline, or what we know in Nigeria as petrol, is obtained from naphtha after further refining. So you don't get it just from distillation, but you have to get to the next stage before you can obtain your gasoline. So this is a picture of a petroleum refinery. Now, downstream also includes petrochemical. Now, so you will see the petrochemicals are chemicals derived from petroleum or natural gas, and they are essential part of today's chemical industry. Their main feedstock are natural gas or condensate and NGLs. So those are the things that could be used by petrochemical plants to provide end products, which includes naphtha, gas oil, benzene, and also plastics, actually. So some of the products you obtain from the petrochemical plant include olefins, which includes ethylene, propylene, and butadiene, which are what you use to make plastics, including polyethylene, polyester, and PVC, and some industrial chemicals and synthetic rubber. Another group of products from petrochemical plants are called aromatics, which include benzene, toluene, and xylenes, and they are source of other types of plastics, including polyurethane, polystyrene, acrylates, and nylon, and also synthetic detergents and dyes. The third type of products from petrochemical plants are known as synthetic gas or syngas, which is formed by reforming, steam reforming between methane and steam. So you change the properties of methane with steam to create a mixture of carbon monoxide and hydrogen, which is used to make ammonia. So this picture summarizes what the processes in a petrochemical plant are. So you could see you get your raw material from naphtha, natural gas, or ethanol, coal. So these are or natural gas liquids. So you can use all these as feed material for your petrochemical plants. Okay, now next we go to the organizations in the oil and gas industry. So we will also divide this by upstream, midstream, and downstream. Now, under upstream, we have exploration and production companies. Then, very importantly, we also have companies we call oil field services companies. So these oil field services companies provide different types of services to the exploration and production companies. And some of the services include exploration services, drilling companies, well servicing, production services, and engineering and construction. So these are the types of services you can provide to the exploration and production companies, which are the main companies in the upstream segment. And the exploration and production companies are generally divided into three types. We have international oil companies, national oil companies, and independent oil companies. And also, in some countries, you may have what you call marginal field operators. Now, international oil companies are generally multinational in nature, and many of them are actually not just upstream companies, but they are called integrated oil companies because they actually operate in all the three segments. That is the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream. So examples of international oil companies are Shell, Royal Dutch Shell, ExxonMobil, British Petroleum, Chevron, and Total. Then for national oil companies, these are state-owned companies, so they are owned by their countries. So examples are Saudi Aramco, Petróleo Brasileiro, that's Petrobras, Sonatrach in Algeria, Pemex in Mexico, and NNPC in Nigeria. And then the third companies are known as independent operators, and this is because they only focus on one segment, which is upstream in this case. So if you are independent upstream operators focus only on upstream, independent midstream operators will focus only on midstream, and so forth. National oil companies, just like IOCs, also may be involved in all the aspects of oil and gas. So this chart just shows you some of the biggest oil and gas companies in the world. So Sinopec, Royal Dutch Shell, Saudi Aramco, PetroChina, BP, ExxonMobil, in that order. Then the oil service companies. So as I mentioned earlier, these companies actually provide those services to the E&P companies, and such services may include, so they provide specialized equipment, services, and skills needed for exploring, drilling, testing, producing, maintaining, and reclaiming of crude oil and natural gas wells. So the first category will be the exploration services companies, which involve using of seismic methods to evaluate where and how to prove a drilling prospect, that's a well, and also use computers and advanced 3D methods to interpret their findings. So, and this will include survey and geotechnical companies. Now, the next category will be drilling companies, which are involved in well design, drilling operations, and processes and related technologies. So that's what drilling companies does. Then another set of companies in this area are well completion services, which brings the production online with advanced downhole equipment, monitoring, and automated equipment. So examples of companies in well completion will be Schlumberger J and Halliburton. Then you also have companies that are called production service companies who apply various physical and chemical processes to increase the amount of oil and gas that can be extracted from a field. and also to remove contaminants to get it ready for sale. Then you have also the offshore engineering and construction contractors. These ones, they provide both design and construction services for platforms and also drilling rigs, and they provide subsurface well completion equipment. Examples would be Technip, Subsea 7, McDermott, Saipem, Foster Wheeler, Petrofac, etc. So that's for upstream companies. For midstream, these will generally be companies that provide the following services. As we mentioned earlier, you know, we have different services here. So you can have barge companies, trucking and hauling companies, pipeline transport companies, logistics and technology companies, and terminal operators. So examples are HOSIS Midstream Partners, OAHO Transneft, Enterprise Product Partners, TransCanada, Enbridge, and Energy Transfer Equity. Now, for the companies in the downstream, these ones are the provide services which includes refining, petrochemical, distribution, wholesale, and retail marketing. So basically the companies that are involved in this, including oil refining, petrochemicals, gas processing, supply and trading, and product marketing, both wholesale and retail, are known as downstream companies. So you have the integrated companies, and you also have just pure downstream companies here. So that brings us to the last part of the presentation, which is about the acronyms. So these acronyms are some of those that I've used during the course of the presentation, which I just summarized for you to be able to refer to. And the last slide gives the references made of. So these are some of the